Alrighty. I have beaten all 8 characters, so I think I'm gonna give my thoughts now. I'm guessing I can only get credits if I beat the super boss, and I don't think I want to do that. I don't even think I want to try to do that. Uh, you know, I'll potentially leave it up to someone else. I can watch. Ghost BTS played this game, so he probably fought the super boss. What story? Uh, I, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Um, so, Octopath Traveler 2 has been conquered. Woot woot. This was a viewer requested game by Revenant the Mage, so thank you very much for this recommendation. For my first impressions, which were based off of day 1 through 3, spent most of my time exploring, but of the 2 character chapters I've done so far, game feels very much like Octopath Traveler 1 in every conceivable way. Uh, doesn't look like they resolved my biggest criticism and dislike from the first game, which was the story structure. Still doesn't seem reasonably possible to do one character story from start to finish before starting another character. And for my overall thoughts, I had a great time playing this game. It was a ton of fun, and like Octopath Traveler 2 just really excels with the mechanics and the visual style and like how the combat is built and um, just like how you interact with the world is just really enjoyable. Unfortunately, despite me having a great time playing this game, I don't like the game for basically the same reasons that I don't like Octopath Traveler 1, and it's the story structure. I can't get behind the idea that I need to play a chapter 1 for one character and then leave that character's story alone and go run through a bunch of other characters' chapters. Um, it it doesn't compute for me. I don't understand how that can be the like default way to play through the game. And sure, there is a little bit of leeway there. You can grind if you wanted to. You can do a couple of stories like I did, and then just carry the rest of the scrubs afterwards. But it that just doesn't necessarily work. It makes every single story disjointed because you're experiencing so many things that are unrelated to the character that you were just experiencing, and you may not come back to that character for a really long time. The only way I was able to leverage the 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 stories that I did in the way that I did is because of all the exploration that I did. Um, sometimes finding enemies that I shouldn't have, um, going places and getting equipment to make me stronger than I should have for that particular level. So yeah, regrettably, it's like I had a lot of fun playing the game, but it feels impossible for me to actually like the game because of how the story works. And I haven't even necessarily like talked about the stories yet, but even ending here on all the 8 characters, I'm not sure a single story really ended in a spot where I'm like, yeah, I really like the start. I really like what they built up to, and I really like how they ended it. Um, and then even after all eight characters are done, there's still nothing to tie them together. Um, which I guess is something that I guess, I'll just mention it now. I don't know when I'll get around to it, but um, one of the main criticisms that I've seen from other people about Octopath Traveler 1, there's like two main criticisms. The first is that characters don't interact with each other. And the second one is there's really no overarching story that, brings all the characters together in a meaningful way through all those stories. And that's still a problem in this game. None of that was fixed here. Yes, there are elements of shadow, um, like dispersed into various characters' story, and there's obviously something more there, but none of the stories link into other characters' stories aside from that. None of the other characters' stories um, allow you to get an idea of what you need to do. And after beating all eight stories, there's still nothing pops up where it's like, oh, maybe we should go here and do this and figure out what's going on. It's really interesting because I feel like I heard a lot of people who have spoken about Octopath Traveler 2 say that a lot of their criticisms were fixed in the game from the first game. So I I don't know how that disconnect comes about. Maybe it's just a me thing. I'm not entirely sure. But there was zero interactions between characters during their stories. There was no interactions with characters out once you finish the stories. They still have the little like um, tavern banter things. Only you can activate them, I think, outside of the tavern now. But that was in the first game, and like that's not what I feel people are talking about. It's not what I would be talking about when I want characters to interact with each other. Um, I think what would have been the best way to go about this is to have your eight character stories. You do them one at a time. You do chapter 1 through 5. You finish it, and there's uh, some sort of like tie with another character, and then you move into the next character. And like each character has kind of like a partner traveler, I guess, that assists them with their story and kind of like the banter and things like that. And then at the very end, they all come together, and it's like, wow, after all eight of those stories, there's this looming evil bad shadow guy, and we need to stop him. Let's put a plan together and let's make it happen. Um, so yeah, it just kind of baffles my mind that like legitimately, I feel like Octopath Traveler 2 is just Octopath Traveler 1.25. That's really how it feels to me. Sure, there's new characters. It's a new world from the looks of things. There's various new mechanics and whatnot, but uh, the way that you play the game is exactly the same. The way that you interact with character stories is exactly the same. Um, it's just different stories. It's a good way to think about it is if Octopath Traveler 1 was uh, itself, Octopath Traveler 2 just adds 8 more characters on top of Octopath Traveler 1 to give it the 1.25. It's kind of how it feels to me, which is not a bad thing in of itself, because y'all know me. I like my sequels to give me more of the same. It's just really unfortunate that I don't like how they handle Octopath Traveler 1's story structure, and they replicate that uh, basically one to one in this game. Granted, like they added some extra stuff. They have like these little dual chapter things, which is pretty cool. But again, there's so much more I wanted from that. That does turn you off to play them. You expected crossovers are a key feature. Yeah, I don't get how I can understand how it can be complicated to do that, because you have 8 characters, and if you're going to allow people to play any chapter you want, you're going to have a chapter 1 at the very least with just one character, and then you somehow have to formulate a plan to allow 7 other characters to potentially involve themselves in chapter 2 through 5, and you have to permutate that across 8 characters. Like that sounds insane, but the way to fix that is to remove the choice. I'd much rather have a full, cohesive, complete narrative that just goes across 8 characters than to just have 8 individual stories that, in of themselves, are not even very fleshed out and complete, which we'll get to in a second here. I also have the game is Octopath Traveler 1 in basically every way, and while this can be an approach I want from sequels, it's the game's downfall here, which I already went through. For story, is it satisfying? This is kind of a weird one. I would say the overarching story is not satisfying, because after beating all 8 chapters, there's nothing to link them together. There's nothing to point you of like, hey, you should go do this. Um, give me a mini credits or something to put the flag down of, hey, you accomplished all the stories. Did it feel complete? Again, this is kind of a weird one, because there's 8 different stories. Um, I'm gonna say yes and no. In terms of all 8 stories, there is a cutoff point where their stories are done, and uh, those in of themselves feel complete to a large degree. Some of them have like little straggler things, but um, I think I could say that the 8 stories in of themselves feel complete. Does the main game story feel complete? That's where things get a little muddy, because there's obviously some narrative being told underneath everything, but it's never really fully brought to the surface, just based off of all the 8 stories, and then after they're all done. How's the pacing? Pretty terrible. The structure in which character stories are interacted with haven't changed at all. This means I still need to do everyone's chapter ones, and then do everyone's chapter twos, etc. Instead, I want to do a singular character's chapter 1 through 5, and then move on to the next character. Yeah, it's pretty rough times. Like, no matter what option you choose to do to accomplish the task of doing one character's story from chapter 1 through 5 back to back, you're going to run into huge impediments. You're either going to uh, grind for a really long time, and grinding an Octopath Traveler absolutely sucks. Battles take a ridiculous amount of time to go through because of the break system, and uh, there's only so many areas to grind in. Like right now, I think the highest level place that I have access to is 52, and my highest level character is 60 or 61 right now. Like, where am I supposed to go to grind? There's still this area over here that I have no Sugafu clue how to get over to, so. Um, Thoughts on the story. One of the biggest criticisms I've seen with Octopath Traveler 1 from other people is that characters don't interact with each other. This doesn't feel addressed in the game at all, with only 3 characters, chapters 2 through 5 left. Touched on this already. There's there's no tie-in with the other characters. There's nothing to really make it feel like a cohesive game. It just feels like 8 truncated stories, I guess. So it's a little disappointing. I know the whole point of the game is to experience 8 character stories, but effectively each one needs more fleshing out, more time spent on character development, backstory, and just general elaboration. I'd love to see less stories, but have them instead be twice as long to fill in all the lightning fast progress. Construct actual characters instead of these traits that they aggressively hold on to but sometimes never reference again. Yeah, so I'll be going through like each character's story one by one, to go through some highlights and things like that. But for the most part, like every character's story just lacked so much because it was restricted to these 5 chapters, and like the way that they formulated it meant that the chapters had to accomplish so much. For Hikari, he needed to be thrusted out of his homeland. He needed to recruit allies, and then he needed to go back to his homeland and liberate it. And to do that in the span of 4 hours, basically, is a lot to accomplish in such a short amount of time, especially when you consider that you need to fill in some of that 4 hours, the potentially even the majority of the 4 hours, maybe not the majority, but you know, a a not so insignificant portion needs to be devoted to encounters, um, a little bit of travel, speaking to various NPCs, boss battles, and things like that. It makes things, uh, it just reduces the amount of time you have to tell your story, and so you kind of have to cut corners where you can. Um, and then for character stories, I'll go in reverse order since, well, this is not technically reverse. I'll go in reversed Octopath order, starting with Hikari, because, I just did his. Um, Although I didn't write this down, I guess I'll write this down. What do I think of this chapter 5? Uh, we'll go with that. Confront Mugen. All right, so first chapter 1, I thought it was okay with potential. Kingdom gets overthrown by Mugen. He needs to bring things back. I thought they set up something that was kind of nice and something to look forward to. Um, Generally, when I think of stories like his, um, I feel like I know what the ending's going to be, but even then, it still ends up being enjoyable. So the likelihood that it would be enjoyable was pretty much there. For chapter two, I thought it was solid. That's the battle in the arena to get Kazan and rescue the gladiators. Um, they had a nice little thing there. Kazan gets a little bit more fleshing out. Um, it 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 was nice to have that kind of character interaction there. But um, obviously, we spend a lot of time going through Hikari's like unwillingness to kill people, and if we fast forward to the end of his story, that it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really accomplish anything because, as characters have already pointed out, like he's gonna have to kill people in order to accomplish the goal that he set out for himself. So it just kind of a strange thing to latch onto. Chapter three, I thought was okay. We gather weapons shipment from Ritsu. There's not a whole lot going on there. The fact that they brought Ritsu back into the fold ultimately does not like do anything for Hikari or really much of the story at all. They could have just cut him ever since the first battle we had with him, and it would have been perfectly fine. Chapter four, I thought was great. That's when we recruit Raimei to the squad, um, and it's less because of Hikari and more because Raimei is a fantastic side character. Um, Certainly, probably at the very least top five, but probably top two, and maybe even one. They did a really good job with Raimei. But there's another character that I also really liked that could compete with that. And then chapter five, I thought was solid. We confront Mugen. Um, it kind of went through the notes that I was expecting with some nice little alterations and things like that. So I thought they did a pretty good job with that. Um, the boss gauntlet, I think, was a little, well, not a little. It was excessive. We didn't need four boss battles in a row, but I do appreciate that I didn't have to grind to complete his story. So there's that. For Throne, chapter one I thought was okay with potential. We're forced to fight Piro for Black Snake succession. Um, I was kind of worried with Throne's initial chapter that it was just going to kind of devolve into we we kill mother and father. She gains her freedom, but she's like, actually, somebody has to, uh, lord over the nest. So she takes over the black snakes. But that actually does not come to pass. Something significantly more left field happens. For chapter two, father side, I thought was okay. We meet father. Um, Rone plans to kill him, but he was on the up and up about that. Chapter two, mother, I thought was okay. We look for mother. We win a drinking contest on their location. Um, for these, for both of these chapter twos, I didn't really feel like we really did much of anything with Rone's character, which I think is kind of consistent through all of her chapters. Um, the problem is Throne's sort of kind of a shell of a character because she's an orphan that doesn't know her parents and she was raised as a killer from an early age. And so she doesn't really have a whole lot to like bulk up her character, I guess, because she's just had a quote unquote one dimensional life. So she kind of struggles to be an interesting person, which in turn makes her stories less interesting. For chapter three, Mother, I thought was solid to good. I'm not sure where I want to commit with that, but infiltrating the orphanage, killing Mother, I thought some interesting aspects were thrown in there. And Mother is a really good character in this game. So it was both satisfying to get a fight with her, but also get some of the dialogue exchange between them and learn more about things. For chapter three, Father, I thought was solid. We catch up to Father, we learn backstory about him, and then we kill him. Chapter four, I have as weird. This is where we meet Claude, Throne's quote unquote real father, who's immortal, has thousands of children, wants to die, founded the Black Snakes to weed out children. I guess has the key to the collar, and we only learn vague stuff about him. This was, without a doubt, the strangest and most unorthodox of all the chapters in this game. No, no other chapters really delve into the same types of topics or um I guess like consequences and things like that. This is the first, air quotes immortal character that we come across, and um like he founded an organization of his children, but like he just has thousands of children for some reason, and for some reason he wants to die. Uh, but like he doesn't present the opportunity of himself dying in a way where it's like, oh, I just need to jump off of a really high cliff or something like that. It's like, no, I need to get one of my children to rise to the top of the ranks of the Black Snakes, and then just magically find themselves in front of me so that I can fight them. And even if they do happen to do that, four children before that particular before Throne have already failed at killing him because he fights back. It's incredibly strange, completely off the wall, and very much out there. Um, I do appreciate it because it's very different, um, but it's very strange. For Agnia, chapter one was meh. Chapter two was giga meh. Chapter three was meh. Chapter four was meh, and chapter five was ultra meh. And every single one of those chapters is basically she goes somewhere and she dances, and uh, without a doubt, the worst uh, stories of all the characters. It was so terrible. Oh my goodness. Um, for Partitio, chapter one, I was definitely very uninterested. We take back the silver mining town. Chapter two, I thought was meh. We get a quest to earn 80 billion leaves. Uh, Partitio is just not really an interesting character at all. I want to eliminate poverty from the world. Is an insane thing for a merchant to want to do. It's like your entire profession is for you to offer a product and to have somebody give you something in exchange for that product. And the vast majority of the time, you're not trading it for another good, you're trading it for funds. So somebody has to fund your ability to do what you want to do, which means that somebody has to pay you to remove poverty from the world. And it makes no sense. And then we in chapter 3, which I thought was meh, we earn 80 billion leaves. And the way we do that is like starting a department store. And our goal here is to earn enough money so that we can buy the rights to a steam engine so that we can just like give it out to a bunch of people when it would be a pretty solid way of improving the lives and removing poverty from the world, pouring in 80 billion leaves to remove poverty. You know what a steam engine's going to do? It's going to increase the poverty level. But if you put 80 billion leaves to get rid of poverty, you're probably going to do a pretty good job at doing that. Just a thought. Chapter 4 I thought was okay. We buy the steam engine, we fight a tank train. Um, it was a little silly. It probably shouldn't be okay, but it is what it is. It had some interesting moments. I would definitely say that Particio is the second worst character, I think. And I was expecting his to be pretty terrible. I wasn't expecting Agnia to be worse than that, but here we are. For Ochette, I thought chapter 1 was meh with potential. That was the islands under attack by mysterious creatures. Chapter 2 was okay. Or chapter 2, Cataracta, I thought was okay. It's dead, but we get the baby. It wasn't necessarily very interesting, but the problem is we're following Ochette, which is basically a child, and we see too many things through Ochette's lens, which is I want to eat meat and jerky and things like that, and it reminds me a lot of Pieberry from Witch Spring R. So I had a very hard time liking Ochette for very similar reasons. But it is what it is. Um, the chapter 2 Terra was asleep and we woke it up. Chapter 2 Glacius, I forget how they pronounce it. Some hunter did some stupid stuff, and you know we reveal that and we bring it to light that humans are stupid. And chapter 3 I thought was solid. We protected the island from the Scarlet Moon. Ochet's was also one of the character stories where we actually get introduced to things that are a little bit more supernatural. It's revealed that like there's this like alternate dimension where like dark creatures come from and things like that. You know, um, and that in of itself presents some very interesting aspects to it because you don't actually know if there is an alternate dimension or if it's just like some magic or something like that. Um, because it's like this ancient story from their people and whatnot. So there's a little bit of niceness going on there. I think one of the larger problems with Ochet's stories is that they inserted this human conflict in there that just went absolutely nowhere and just felt like a waste of time. You go rescue the kid from the cave and they're like, okay, you saved the kid. We kind of owe you one, so we won't bring up the idea of taking more land from the island from the beastmen for a while. And then like literally the next one they're like, hey, we're back, we want more land. And it's just like, what are you doing? we could be spending some more time with these other creatures that we're supposed to be gathering or something like that. Spend more time with the lion dude. Lion dude was cool. For Temenos, chapter one, I thought was very interesting. We investigate a plot where the pontiff is murdered. Um, in like I in chapter one, I was like, wow, Temenos has this really interesting personality. He's paired up with this character named Crick, who um, ties in to Temenos's personality like so well. He's like so naive and and propped up on the faith of of his like church or something like that. And then you have Temenos, who's a member of the church and a very high ranking member of the church, but he's so, I guess I'll say, doubtful of like how things work, and I don't want to say realistic either, but like he just has a very uh ooh, there's a really good word for this. Um like heretical kind of viewpoint on things. And so he's very quick to not believe the things or require more information first before he starts believing things, whereas Crick is very quick to believe things. And the pairing that these two characters uh give them, like they form a really complete character, and that made that chapter one very very special. um and that kind of continues for the various chapters afterwards. For chapter two, was pretty nice. We investigate the plot to murder reverse Octopath representatives. Very interesting coming across this and being like, okay, like what are they trying to do? Where are they trying to work with this? Um, I like the idea and the implementation of Temenos kind of going into Sherlock Holmes mode and be like, okay, let's identify all the things that need to be identified and then put them in the correct order and get a pretty good idea of what happened and what I got to do next. For chapter three, I thought it was interesting. That was when we went to the Felsun ruins. We investigate the ruins tied to an old church order. A lot of intrigue here, a lot of juicy morsels of how things could play out in the future. So I thought that was nice. Um, Chapter 3.5 I have here. This is the winter area. I have good, and my description for that is Crick no. Crick dies in this one, which is incredibly sad because up to this point, Crick was probably my favorite side character in the entire game. Um, Maybe not even probably. Like he was the best side character in this game, and there was no competition for it. Um, and so him getting killed off, it hurts that great relationship that Temenos and Crick have, where they form this really complete character. And then, we just don't have that anymore. And it's like, no, Crick, you were cool. Um, but yeah, then we get into chapter four, which I thought was okay, and that's when we confront Caldina. And I would say, like overall, I'm not. I I really like how Temenos' story starts, but as soon as chapter 3.5 in the winter place happens, and it's revealed that the the sacred guard is basically behind everything, it kind of deflated the whole thing, because the Sacred Guard just weren't an interesting enough antagonist to bring this to light. Whereas Vados the Architect was very much a mysterious and interesting character. And one of the things that built him up to that is because we kind of get to interact with him throughout the various chapters, and he's kind of like the centerpiece of this mystery. But with the Sacred Guard, they're just it's one of those things where it's just like, are you guys in on it or are you not? Are you guys being tricked or are you not? Um, and it wasn't as interesting to them be revealed as it, whereas we had this great character, Vados, um, and then he just gets killed off, and we don't really get um, more information about the reverse Octopath killings and things like that. So I felt like it was a missed opportunity there. But that being said, I think Temenos' story was the best out of everybody's. I found it super interesting. For the most part, all of the characters were interesting. Temenos himself is probably the best out of the 8 Octopath characters. His personality, his outlook on things, his interactions with characters, the characters that he's interacting with, like all of those are uh, so much better than all the other chapters. And Crick is an absolute boss. Can't forget Crick. For Casti, I thought her chapter 1 was meh with potential. She heals people despite amnesia and was possibly in a cult. Chapter 2, I thought was whack. She reforms Edmund the jerk in 5 minutes. This this chapter, this one, I probably can't say it's the worst chapter because Agnia's chapters exist, but it is probably like the most poorly written chapter, I guess. Like, at least with Agnia, she's protecting a bar from a theater manager, or she's inspiring Giselle to do her troupe performance, or she's inspiring Layla. She's, doing a dance battle with Dulcinea. But Casti's chapter 2 is like, this guy presents himself and he's a total jerk, and like he just doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. And then Casti brings him along and is like, she's like, look, these are your enemies, go get healing supplies for them so that you, their enemy, can help them. And he was just like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to go do that. And it just, like, what is going on here? If you're gonna have this guy swap sides, you gotta build up into it. You gotta ease that decision making process in there. It just can't be at the snap of the fingers. So I didn't like that one at all. Chapter 2.5, Gigameh. We meet Rosa, stop Greg from taking over the town. That one had potential. I remember this one. Meet Rosa. Who the Sakafu is Rosa? And who's Greg? Uh, I don't remember this one. Well, it was Gigameh, so whatever. Chapter 3, I thought was solid to nice. Trousseau's descent into evil. I really wish that they they brought in Trousseau like in chapter 2 or something like that. Um, the real big problem with Casti's uh, stories is, one, they're going with amnesia, and so you waste so much time dealing with amnesia, and two, there's this this overarching thing of heirs apothecaries are like these evil people that do all these crazy things, and like none of that just turns out to be substantiated at all, and it makes it so that the interesting aspect of her chapter 1 makes it so that it's pointless. Like, she's just amnesia from an apothecary group, and they're just nice people, and it like retroactively ruins her chapter 1 that had potential. um and what it really needed was for Trousseau, like, her chapter 3 probably needed to be her chapter 1, is probably how I would go into it. And instead, we're in an apothecary group. We're doing apothecary group things. And we have Trousseau, who just joins the group, and he's this bright-eyed guy that wants to do things. Um, but, he's messing up along the way. And eventually, we start seeing a descent into madness. And then we finally get her chapter 4, which I thought was okay, where we stop Trousseau's poison. But like, we waste so much time. Oh, Rosa. Rosa was the girl that was dying on the bed, and we save, or her kid she needs to live long enough for her kid to turn 12. Man, that one was giga mad. Like, that would giga man needs to be in all caps for that. Um, so yeah, overall, Casties was pretty terrible. I'd probably put Casty as the third worst. Um, but like, the gap between, or the gap from Casti, Particio, and Agnia, like, those three are definitively at the bottom. And then like everyone else is just like so much higher than that. Like, those three characters just suck. And then everyone else had things about their stories that certainly were significantly more interesting, or had aspects that could be latched on to that were interesting for me. And finally, Oswald, chapter 1, I thought was interesting. We break out of prison to get revenge on Harvey. Chapter 2, I thought was okay. This was a really short chapter. We escape prison island on a boat without Emerald, which we later learned through a side quest that he did it on purpose, and Manadride was right, which is a blow to me, because I was 100% correct until I did that side quest. One of those, I think, like Schrodinger's things, or maybe it's the opposite of Schrodinger. I don't know. Chapter 3, I thought was meh. We track down Harvey's henchman to learn where he's at. There's really not much going on in that chapter. Just kind of silly, I guess. I guess uh, in that chapter we meet his assistant, which is probably the catalyst for that. But she's also like, she tries to rein in on his revenge impulses and things like that, and it brings it down so much. It's like, don't get in the way of this man and his revenge. It is 1000% justified, and it needs to happen. You can't just sit in prison for 5 years and the only thing you think about is your revenge, and then you go home and your assistant's like, you should actually just forgive the guy and just move on with your life. Like, get out of here. Chapter 4, I thought was solid. We found Harvey. We fight quote unquote wife. The kid is alive. Crazy experiments are going on. Um, there was a lot of interesting things here, but also at the same time, this is another example of things moving like at lightning speed. Um, there's also the problem of Harvey's right in front of you. Just kill the sucker. But Harvey's running around doing whatever he wants to do, and there's like no consequences for it. He just walks off. It's like, come on, dog. I know you just found out your child is alive. There was plenty of opportunities before that. You don't need to talk to this guy about the one true magic all the time. Just like kill him and don't worry about it. Um, and chapter 5, we confront Harvey and we rescue Elena, and I thought that one was solid. Unfortunately, I don't think Harvey really turned into a great antagonist, and that's probably mostly due to the fact that we get 2 chapters for Harvey. Um, and like obviously there's like little backstory things going on and whatnot, but um, I think we needed more time dedicated to Harvey for Harvey to actually make it to be like this great antagonist or something. But yeah, if I like off the top of my head, I may not commit to this, but if I were to rank the character stories, I would probably go Temenos, probably go Ikari, probably go Oswald, Throne, and Ochette. And then in like the depths of the sewers, 600 million miles down, there's Particio, Casti, no, yeah, Casti, Particio, and Agnia. Um, yeah, I think Casti is above Particio, but it's it's mostly because of Trousseau. Yeah. Um, has CC on Ducati? I don't know what that means. For gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? Being able to recruit a character and either save their chapter 1 or skip it entirely is pretty cool. I was not expecting this to be an option in this game. In Octopath Traveler 1, you have to do uh, you have to do a character's chapter 1 basically to gain access to that character. As far as I remember, anyways. And in this game, you don't have to do that. So I had this really nice interaction where I recruited uh, Temenos, and then I recruited Ochette, and then I went around and did like various stories and things like that. And it was a really nice feature. I'm glad they added that. I don't think I'm a fan of the day and night cycle. It doesn't really add anything meaningful, and it's weird to tie it to different character path actions. Yeah. So on one hand, like the day and night cycle is kind of cool in the sense of it changes things, and it's really neat to have that kind of duality in the game. The problem is that nothing really comes about that duality. It's just kind of a mechanic that's there, and there's not a whole lot that's tied to it. Um, some characters can only do things at night. That in of itself is more of a hindrance than it is, something that's cool and interesting. Some characters, when they join battles at night, they buff your party or they debuff the enemy. And that's a really cool dynamic. But in of itself, it's not really worth the whole day night cycle in of itself. And then you get into some of the more awkward portions of it. Like I visited a dungeon and I saw the side quest mark, but I was at daytime and the person that was there to turn in the side quest for wasn't there. And I didn't think to myself, oh, let me change it to nighttime. That'll make this person spawn. Um, so on one hand, that's a me problem, but on the other hand, it's not like there's not enough incentive to cycle between day and night and get something out of it. Um, the game really needs to reinforce that mechanic with more interesting implementations, and then constantly have reminders about that implementation throughout the game, which I don't think Octopath Traveler 2 does. Um, Not a fan of the amount of overlap between character path actions. It's basically acquire items, fight enemy, or have them summonable in combat. Yeah, I think they had this same dynamic in the first game, but I would really like there to be more unique path actions. Uh, there are characters that steal things. There are characters that recruit people, and there's characters that move people out of the way. Um, it it would be nice if every character did something unique to that specific character. Um, on the other hand, it is also kind of nice that there is that double up, because then you're not forcing yourself to use one character to do something. You can use sort of an alternate character to do that thing. It's not a like a perfect alternate, because the day night cycles means that some characters are available, or some NPCs are available at day and some at night, and some characters can't do things versus other characters can do things depending on the day night cycle. So it's not a great replacement, but it 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 does do something, I guess. There is sort of a positive aspect to it. Kind of like keeping a Pokemon in your party because they could use a special HM ability. Yeah. Speaking of that, that's actually a very interesting um, comparison, because the Pokemon games actually um, did away with that interaction where like HMs and TMs are things that you just constantly have access to now. So it would be very interesting if they did that for Octopath Traveler as well. Instead of those actions being tied to the characters, it's tied to those characters in the sense of once you recruit them, or maybe if you finish their story, then you can perform their path action without them in your party. That would be kind of cool. Kind of cool. I do like the differentiation between the character overlap, though. It's cool that Temenos just has to break the enemy while Oswald fights them to steal them, and Ochette fights them to move them out of the way. Um, so it is cool that, like, even though there's that overlap, the characters approach them in different ways. Oswald has to fight you to steal your stuff, whereas Throne, just steals your stuff. So that's kind of cool. Oswald, he can just scrutinize you to get information, but Temenos, he has to fight you in a battle, like this mental mind battle, and break the enemy in order to gain access to that information. So they did a pretty cool kind of switch up there where they made the duplicate path actions a little bit more interesting. So I do appreciate that. It's not really intentional per se, but I really enjoyed exploration in this. I liked visiting areas I shouldn't have been in, unlocking new areas on the map to fast travel to, and finding powerful items ahead of time. Yeah, I did something similar to this in the first game, and I felt really rewarded for it. And I was like, I want to do this again in this game. And I didn't have the same amount of rewardedness, primarily because the class dungeons are no longer in this game, from what I can see. Um, but I still had a great time just exploring the various areas and sometimes getting treasure chests that I couldn't, but you know, going to towns way ahead of time and just buying equipment that I shouldn't have access to, like exploration in games. Like, if you get that going good, I'm probably gonna have a good time if I engage in that exploration. So I enjoyed that. The secondary classes are much more difficult to locate this time around. I admittedly do miss the super bosses tied to them from the first game, but this approach is fine as well. Yeah, so there's still a class that I have not found. Um, maybe I'll look it up or something like that. Um, but um, there's it was I in the first game, I spent hours upon hours fighting the super bosses to get their classes, and I have a lot of like nostalgia towards that. It's probably not all that interesting, in the grand scheme of things, and it's probably better they approached it this way than they did in Octopath Traveler 1. But um, maybe like just have one, super boss class dude, just something like that. Like, them abandoning the idea entirely from the looks of things uh certainly feels strange. um I really don't like the format of having three main party members with a rotating fourth to do their chapters. Yeah, I think this is a huge inherent flaw of the Octopath Traveler system, and it really came into play for Throne, because unfortunately they some characters get locked out of doing things based off of their level, and that's a huge problem when that character is not part of your main party. I don't know how they expect you to. I don't know how they expect you to go through the game. Like, do they expect you to start off with four characters and then just cycle out those three of those characters for three new characters and level them up or something like that? It's very strange, but yeah. I need some water. We're almost there. Gotta go to work soon, anyway. For combat, I don't really have a whole lot written here for combat, but as I mentioned at the somewhat start of this, I I think the combat is really slow, but that doesn't bother me when I'm fighting um like to achieve something. I actually really like the combat in this game. It's, to me, incredibly unique, and it looks so good, and it feels really good to engage with it. Just building up 4 BP and just, like, yeah, I'm gonna hit them with this super big ability, and it's gonna cover the entire screen, and it's gonna do 75,000 damage. Um, this is one of those games where getting the big numbers feels really good, and uh, getting the not so big numbers doesn't feel like all too great. But the goal is to get the big numbers and just see like explosions on screen and stuff like that. And on top of that, when you use the 3 BP to get your fully buffed up ability. Like it goes in like this like cinematic mode where it changes the camera angle and it does like the great thing. It just they it's such a cool combat system. You gotta break your enemies, and when you break them, they lose a turn, and you do more damage to them. And then they come back, and they do the thing. And sometimes you can exploit it so that you break them at the start of a turn, and they lose their turn for that turn, and they lose their turn for the next turn. And like it's a great combat system. I will say, however, Ghost BTS mentioned this to me during his stream, and then I think he was here yesterday and touched on it as well. That the items in this game, they don't have numbers associated with them, and that's really annoying because the only way to find out what they do and how positive the effect is to actually use them in combat. Um, but you don't want to do that because when you need to use that item, you probably need a specific amount. So they have plenty of room in the description boxes and things like that. They need to put the numbers in there. It's really annoying. No book slapping. Did the scholar have a book? I don't think Oswald had a book. He was in prison. All right. He had all the formulas memorized in his mind. But yeah, combat is cool. Latent power I think is also really cool. I wasn't expecting this to be all too interesting, but it adds some cool dynamics to things. Some characters like Temenos, I don't think are strong enough. Um, but you know, maybe I needed a different class combination to really take advantage of that. Got nothing for dungeons. I should probably just remove that. Cardinal sins, no value indicator or tell to determine enemy HP. You can technically analyze them, but their HP doesn't stay on the screen, and there's no way to gain access to that information again unless you analyze again. And as I'm uh, growing more in the age department, um, kind of come to the conclusion that this is not really an acceptable way to navigate around this cardinal sin. So if I spend the turn, which is a very valuable turn to analyze something, just have either their hit points stay on the screen so that I can have a constant reminder of it, or when I select the boss again, for like an attack, it shows their hit points. Also, backup party earns less experience. If you're not in the main four, you don't get any experience, and it wouldn't be so bad if you don't have situations like what happened to Throne, where I have to get her up to level 34 so that I can complete her chapter. I don't think there's anything else for Cardinal Sins. For miscellaneous sound and music, the music was pretty solid. I think some of the tracks that I really enjoyed in the first game didn't have the same counterparts in this game. But the battle theme was nice. The boss themes were nice. A lot of the Western continent music was nice. Um, like for the most part, I think all the songs that I heard were pretty solid, and I don't think very many of them were ones that didn't feel like memorable to some degree, I guess. Um, but also at the same time, some of the styles of music didn't really do it for me. So There's that. For voice acting, I thought the voice acting was really good. I think everybody did a pretty good job with how they approach the characters. Temenos, Crick, uh, what was her name? I don't remember her. Raime. They all did phenomenal jobs. They really made those characters stand out and be above the rest. For graphics, the visuals of this game are absolutely wonderful. It's like, in addition to it being a turn-based game, it also has this incredibly unique art style to itself, and it it really just makes this game a lot more interesting to engage with than you would any other game, because it has this identity to it that's not necessarily replicated elsewhere, certainly to the same degree. For other, if it's a sequel, does it achieve more of the same? Yes. This is Octopath Traveler 1. Faults and all. So it does achieve more of the same. It's just unfortunate that that ultimately comes as a negative for me, in the, like, enjoyability factor, I guess. Like, I recognize that it's an interesting, I guess, dichotomy where I had a ton of fun playing this game, but I also didn't really enjoy it or latch onto it because of how its story structure works. And I think that primarily just comes about to me being a gameplay first kind of person. As long as the gameplay is good, you could probably get through any game out there, regardless of how the story is. Um, yeah. Is the game worth recommending? I feel like I have to say yes here. Um, if somebody likes Octopath Traveler 1, you're guaranteed to like Octopath Traveler 2. Um, I think the real question here is more along the lines of, like, is this game is like is this game worth playing over other games if you were hesitant on Octopath Traveler 1? And I think that's really when you get into, like, the weeds of things. Um, so I would say the game is worth recommending, but if if there's some sort of fence sitting on Octopath Traveler 1, I I think it's probably worth um, doing more of a deep dive. If the developer is watching, uh, so come on now. Um, I think this is just one of those scenarios where, you know, I I want more of the same from sequels, but this is one of those situations where I need something significant to change with the structure of the story, um, to be able to generate a game that I can actually have fun playing. And now that we're two games into the Octopath Traveler franchise or saga or whatever you want to call it, um, it seems to be giving me the impression that the way that the stories are created and cycled through is more of a feature of the series rather than just a this was our starting point. Um, so for me, I want to be able to go through every character's chapter in like in numbered order. I want to finish a character's story to completion from start to finish without having to go through any other characters to effectively level up my character to accomplish that. I don't want to have to grind uh, either purposefully through just going to areas and fighting enemies so that I can do it, or grind inadvertently by experiencing other character stories so that I can get the characters that I want to the level required. Other than like outside of the story structure, mechanically speaking, gameplay speaking, combat speaking, I think all of those are in a great place. There's, I think latent power was a very minor change that adds some nice like complexity to combat of when you want to use things. Some characters have multiple options to choose from, and I appreciate how simple of an addition it appears to be, but also the depth of what it can offer. And I think just adding another style of add-on like that would be sufficient enough to, just, dust off Octopath Traveler 2's combat system with a little added thing, and now you have Octopath Traveler 3, and it's the same combat, it just has, an extra bell or whistle. Um, but yeah. Do I want a sequel? Uh, do I want a sequel that has the same story structure? No. Do I want there to be some significant changes in the sequel to how the story structure is done? If I get one of those, then yes. Uh, not the greatest of answers, but um, I I will say that the idea of playing an Octopath Traveler 3, or even to a large extent Octopath Traveler 0, is not something that I have very much excitement or anticipation for, because now, having been 2 games in, I see, I think I see where they're going and what they're not going to change and what they are going to change. Um, and if the structure of the story is going to stay like this for the rest of the franchise, then um, I'm just going to continue to have the same opinion of combat is great. Everything about the storytelling just needs so much work that it just detracts from my enjoyment a great deal. But that is all of my thoughts. To reiterate my overall thoughts, I had a lot of fun playing the game. Can't say that I liked it though, because I didn't really get to experience the story in a way that I think is most conducive for a game like this and makes the most sense. But there's a lot to like about this game, and sometimes we just have conflicting thoughts and opinions on how we approach a certain thing. That's what life is all about. Um, I think that's everything I want to talk about, so I will end my thoughts here. Yeah.